I was halfway through my commute home when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail. Boston traffic was bad enough without juggling calls, but something told me to answer. "This is Claire Anderson," I said, one hand tightening on the steering wheel. The voice on the other end was measured, formal. "Ms. Anderson, this is David Miller, attorney for Robert Whitfield." The name froze me. Uncle Robert, my mother's older brother, the man I'd seen only a handful of times in my life, usually at awkward holiday dinners where the air seemed thick with unspoken grudges. "I'm sorry to tell you. Your uncle passed away last week." "Oh," I managed, unsure how to feel. I wasn't close to him, but there was a flicker of sadness. Uncle Robert had always seemed different, a little intimidating, but not unkind. David's voice didn't waver. "There's something else. Mr. Whitfield left a will. In it, he names you as his sole beneficiary. His estate is valued at approximately $9.5 million plus real property." I almost laughed. "I think you have the wrong Claire Anderson." "No, Miss Anderson," David replied smoothly. "It's you." He was quite clear. By the time I hung up, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My mind started flipping through memories like an old photo album. Robert's quiet stare, the way he'd once told me I reminded him of himself, the occasional birthday cards that showed up in my mailbox with a crisp $50 bill tucked inside. $9.5 million. I pictured telling my husband, Mark. We'd been struggling for years. His photography career going nowhere, my job in advertising eating away at my sanity. This was the miracle we needed. I imagined his face lighting up, his arms pulling me in. I decided not to tell him over the phone. I'd surprise him. I'd pick up something special on the way, a designer watch I'd seen him eyeing at a shop downtown. The rain began just as I left the store, fat drops tapping against the windshield. My mind was a storm of what-ifs: new house, paying off debts, maybe even starting the family we'd kept postponing. I was only 20 minutes from home when it happened. A semi in the lane beside me started to fishtail. I remember the screech of brakes, the horrifying angle of its trailer as it swung sideways, the impossible speed at which my own car was shoved toward the guardrail. Glass exploded, metal crumpled. The watchbox slid across the dashboard in slow motion. Then, blackness. When I woke up, the world was sterile white and smelled faintly of antiseptic. A woman in scrubs leaned over me, her voice soft. "You're in St. Mary's Hospital. You were in an accident." I tried to speak, but my throat burned. My first thought was of Mark. "Did my husband come?" I croaked. The nurse hesitated, and in that moment, I knew something was very, very wrong. The nurse's pause lasted only a second, but it was long enough for my stomach to knot. "We tried calling him several times," she finally said. "No answer. We left voicemails." I blinked, trying to push through the fog in my head. The morphine made my thoughts sluggish, like I was trying to run underwater. "How long have I been here?" "2 days," she replied. "You were unconscious until this morning. You've got some broken ribs, a fractured wrist, and a concussion, but you're lucky to be alive." 2 days, and my husband hadn't shown up once. Can I have my phone?" I asked. The nurse fetched it from a small plastic bag on the counter. The screen was cracked, but it lit up with a shaky press of my thumb. No missed calls from Mark, no messages, just a string of work emails and a couple of "get well soon" texts from friends who'd apparently heard about the accident before my own husband. I texted him, "I'm awake, in the hospital. Can you come?" The reply came 5 minutes later. "Busy with a project. Will come by when I can." That was it. No. "Are you okay?" "No, I'm on my way." Just cold detachment. Over the next 2 days, I waited. My mom came, her face tight with worry. My friend Lindsay dropped by with flowers. But Mark? Nothing. By day 5, the nurse, Emily Parker, had become my lifeline. She'd stop in on her breaks, telling me about her kids, cracking jokes to distract me from the ache in my ribs. One afternoon, while she was fluffing my pillows, she said, "You sure your husband knows you're here?" "He knows," I said bitterly. "He just doesn't care." She gave me a look I couldn't quite read, like she knew more than she was saying. That night, I decided to check social media. My hands were shaking as I opened Instagram. There he was, Mark, tagged in a photo at a trendy art lounge. Champagne in one hand, arm around a young brunette in a glittering dress. The caption read, "Celebrating New Beginnings." My chest tightened. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a networking event, maybe the girl was just a fan. But when I clicked her profile, my blood ran cold. Photo after photo of her and Mark, some recent, some going back months, dinner dates, weekend getaways, him kissing her cheek in a photo taken just 2 weeks before my accident. I didn't even notice Emily walk in until she said my name. When I showed her the pictures, she didn't look surprised. "Claire," she said gently, "there's something you need to know. Mark's been telling people that you didn't survive the crash." I stared at her, the room spinning. And then she added, "He's with that woman now. Everyone thinks you're gone." I didn't believe Emily at first. How could I? The idea that my own husband was telling people I was dead felt like something out of a bad TV drama. "Who told you that?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She glanced toward the hallway before leaning closer. "One of the orderlies here went to college with your husband. He saw a post about your memorial gathering. Said it was at some downtown wine bar last weekend. A memorial, while I was lying in a hospital bed breathing." Emily squeezed my hand. "You should talk to someone you trust before you confront him." The only person I could think of was Lindsay. She was my closest friend, my sounding board since college. I texted her, and she came the next morning, her face pale and tight. "I didn't know how to tell you," she began, sitting on the edge of my bed. "Claire, he's been with her for a while. A woman named Samantha. People thought you knew." I shook my head, my breath catching. "Who is she?" "She's younger, maybe 20, 21. I think she's a photography student. I met her once at an art show. Didn't realize she was this." Lindsay's voice faltered. "After the accident, Mark told everyone you didn't make it. A week later, they got married at the courthouse." My brain couldn't process it. Married? As in, legally? While I was still alive? Lindsay handed me her phone, the screen showing a photo from Samantha's profile, her in a short white dress, bouquet in hand, Mark beside her in a navy suit, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "I'm so sorry," Lindsay whispered. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something across the room, but instead, I sat frozen, staring at that picture until my eyes burned. When she left, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through Samantha's social media late into the night, piecing together their timeline. Romantic beach photos in June. I had been working late nights then, trying to pay off Mark's credit card debt. A selfie of them at a rooftop bar in July, the night he'd told me he was out networking with potential clients. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. By morning, my numbness had turned into something sharper. I needed answers. I needed to know how deep this went, and if there was a way to stop whatever he was planning next. Emily came in to check my vitals, but when she saw my face, she paused. "You look like you've made up your mind about something." "I'm going to call David Miller," I said. "Your uncle's lawyer?" "Yes. If Mark's telling people I'm dead, there's a reason. And I have a feeling it has to do with that inheritance." Emily's brow furrowed, but she didn't try to stop me. When David picked up, I got straight to the point. "Has my husband been in touch with you?" His sigh told me everything before he even spoke. David's voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind it. "Yes, Claire. Your husband contacted me the day after your accident. He said you had died at the scene. I gripped the phone tighter, my fractured wrist throbbing. And you believed him? There was a police report, preliminary, but it mentioned a fatality. I assumed. He stopped himself. Claire, you have to understand. He came to my office with a copy of your marriage certificate, your death announcement, even a notarized affidavit from a so-called witness to your passing. My mind reeled. Why would he do that? David hesitated. Because, according to Massachusetts probate law, a surviving spouse inherits if there is no competing will. And since you were named sole beneficiary in your uncle's will, he was positioning himself to claim the estate in your absence. I felt the air leave my lungs. He's trying to take everything. Yes, and it would have worked, David said grimly. If you hadn't, well, survived. A knock on my hospital door made me glance up. Emily peeked in, holding my chart, but I waved her away for privacy. What happens now? I asked. That depends, David replied. I can halt the probate process immediately, but if he believes you're still incapacitated or unaware, he might try to interfere in other ways. Claire, you need to be careful. This man has already crossed legal lines. He could cross others. Meaning, if he thinks you're a threat to his plans, you could be in danger. A cold shiver ran through me. Mark wasn't violent, at least not in the years I'd known him. But there had been flashes, moments when his temper burned hotter than it should, and now, knowing what was at stake, I couldn't ignore the possibility. David continued, If I were you, I wouldn't let him know you've uncovered this yet. Play along until we have everything in writing. I'll arrange for a formal statement confirming your survival and reclaiming your legal rights to the estate. But until then, don't be alone with him. When I hung up, I sat there staring at the cracked phone screen, my thoughts a storm. Mark hadn't just betrayed me. He had buried me in the eyes of the world for money. Emily returned, her expression cautious. Bad news? I told her everything. The fake death, the inheritance, the lawyer's warning. She listened without interrupting, then crossed her arms. So you're telling me, she said slowly, that your husband is out there spending your uncle's millions with his new wife, thinking you're in the ground? Yes. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Then I think it's time you stop being his victim. That night, lying in the dark hospital room, I made a decision. I wouldn't just take back what was mine. I would make him regret ever thinking I was gone. 3 days later, I was cleared for discharge. My ribs still ached with every breath, and my wrist was wrapped in a stiff brace, but my mind was sharper than it had been since the crash. Emily helped me into a loose sweater and jeans that Lindsay had brought from my apartment. You sure you want to go home? She asked. Because if he's there, I'm not going home, I said. Not yet. I had asked Lindsay if I could stay with her for a while. She'd agreed without hesitation, even insisted on driving me from the hospital herself. We avoided my neighborhood entirely. My apartment was only 15 minutes from Mark's studio, and if he saw me walking around alive, the game would be over before I was ready. In Lindsay's guest room, I finally exhaled. It was small but cozy. Pale blue walls, a quilt on the bed, sunlight spilling through sheer curtains. For the first time in days, I felt safe. The next morning, David called. Claire, I've filed an emergency petition to halt all estate transfers until further notice. Legally, the inheritance is still yours, but I have to warn you. Once Mark finds out, he'll push back. He won't find out, I said. Not until I'm ready. And that meant finding out exactly what he'd been up to since the accident. I started with Samantha's social media again. She posted often. Too often. The kind of constant oversharing that people like Mark usually hated. But I realized he must have been letting her post, because it looked like they were living their new life without any fear. Dinner at an upscale seafood restaurant, time-stamped the night I was in surgery. a photo of her hand with a diamond ring, champagne glasses in the background, just 2 days after my death. But one post caught my eye. A boomerang of them signing papers at a bank, tagged at a private wealth management firm. The caption read, "Securing our future." I screenshotted everything, dates, times, locations. Over the next week, Lindsay and I built a timeline of their movements, cross-referencing it with Mark's public appearances and Samantha's geotagged posts. We found patterns: the same coffee shop every Friday morning, her yoga studio at 6 p.m. sharp, his business dinners at a hotel downtown. I also visited my uncle's old house in Lexington. Or rather, I parked down the street and watched. The curtains were drawn, but I recognized Mark's car in the driveway. He was already moving in. That night, I called David again. If Mark thinks I'm dead, how is he accessing the property? Likely through a temporary executor appointment, David said. If he convinced the court you died without updating your address, he could have claimed control until probate finalized. But now that we've halted everything, he can't sell the property or touch the funds. He just doesn't know that yet. Good, I said, a slow plan forming in my mind. Because I'm going to make sure the first time he sees me will be the last time he tries to take what's mine. The idea came to me in fragments, bits of overheard conversations, late-night Google searches, and David's cautious legal advice. If I showed up at Mark's door screaming about betrayal, he'd twist it. He'd claim I was unstable, maybe even accuse me of faking my injuries for sympathy. But if I played my cards right, I could catch him red-handed, not just in adultery, but in fraud. Step 1. Make him feel safe. Through Lindsay's work connections, I learned that Samantha was hosting a photography showcase in 2 weeks at an upscale downtown gallery. The invite list was public on her event page, and sure enough, Mark was listed as a featured artist. Perfect. Step 2. Gather proof. David agreed to quietly request copies of any legal documents Mark had filed in my absence. Affidavits, death certificates, executor appointments, anything with forged signatures or falsified details. If we can prove he knowingly submitted false information, it's fraud and perjury, David said. Step 3. Control the reveal. I didn't want a confrontation in private where Mark could corner me. I wanted an audience. People he respected, people whose opinions mattered to him. Investors, clients, even his new wife. The gallery would be full of them. The trick would be keeping my survival secret until then. I cut my hair, nothing drastic, just enough that I looked different in passing. I wore glasses I didn't need, avoided old friends who might slip up and post something online. Emily smuggled my old wedding ring from my apartment before Mark could take it, and I kept it on a chain around my neck as a reminder of what I'd lost. Every day, I checked Samantha's event updates. She posted sneak peeks of her photos, mostly atmospheric city shots, a few portraits, and then one made my skin crawl, a black and white of my uncle's estate, taken from the garden I used to sit in as a child. She had captioned it, "Our new beginning." The hour stung. Lindsay helped me plan my appearance. We'd arrive separately, so if Mark spotted her, he wouldn't suspect I was close by. I'd wear something understated, black dress, minimal makeup, so the shock would come from my presence, not my clothes. But the most important piece wasn't the outfit or the location, it was the recording device. David arranged for a private investigator to attend the event as a guest. He'd have a concealed microphone and a small camera disguised as a lapel pin. My job was simple: draw Mark into admitting everything. Late one night, as I rehearsed what I might say, Lindsay walked into the kitchen and slid her phone across the counter. It was a text from an unknown number. Unknown. "I heard you survived. Be careful. He's angry." No signature. I stared at it, my pulse quickening. "Who sent this?" Lindsay shook her head. "I don't know, but it means someone out there already knows you're alive." The text rattled me more than I wanted to admit. If someone knew I had survived, then the clock was ticking. I tried calling the number back, but it went straight to a deadline. No ring, no voicemail, just an abrupt disconnect. A burner phone. Could it be one of his friends? Lindsay asked. Or one of hers, I said, my mind racing. Samantha's friends were mostly art students, not the type to get involved in something like this, unless Mark had confided in them, or worse, unless one of them had seen me in public despite my precautions. I checked my phone's location settings. Disabled. My accounts were logged out. Still, paranoia began to creep in. That night, I called David. What if he already knows? If he did, he wouldn't sit on it quietly, David replied. He'd try to confront you or discredit you before we could act. Until we see signs of that, assume the warning came from someone who doesn't want to be directly involved. But they know where I am. Not necessarily. And if they do, that's all the more reason to stick to the plan. His calmness helped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The next day, I decided to test it. I left Lindsay's apartment and walked to the small coffee shop across the street, deliberately choosing a seat by the window. I stayed there for nearly an hour, sipping tea and pretending to read, all the while scanning the sidewalk for anyone lingering too long. Halfway through my cup, I spotted a man sitting in a car parked across the street, sunglasses, baseball cap pulled low. He didn't get out, didn't even look at his phone, just sat there. When I left the shop, I took the long way back, doubling back twice. The car didn't follow, but the unease stayed. That night, Lindsay suggested moving up the timeline. If he's getting hints you're alive, we can't wait 2 weeks for the gallery. What if you show up somewhere sooner?
No, I said firmly. The gallery is where he'll be surrounded by people, cameras, and the kind of witnesses who can't just be bought or intimidated. If I confront him too soon, he'll spin it. He's had months to shape the narrative. I need one night to blow it apart. Still, I added an extra step to the plan, a decoy. Lindsay would post a carefully staged photo of me, old enough that it looked recent, but blurry enough that it could be dismissed, tagging it from a location several towns away on the night of the gallery. If anyone was watching me, they'd be chasing the wrong lead. The warning had changed one thing, though. I was no longer thinking just about inheritance or revenge. If Mark felt cornered, I wasn't sure how far he'd go. And now, for the first time since the accident, I began to wonder if I might not survive the ending I was planning. The night of the gallery arrived with a cold drizzle that painted the streets in glassy reflections. I dressed slowly, my hands steady despite the storm in my chest. Black dress, minimal makeup, hair tucked into a loose twist. I wanted to look like myself, but not the self he remembered. Lindsay left ahead of me to play her part. She'd mingle, stay visible, and post the decoy photo at exactly 8:15 p.m., tagging us at a restaurant 20 miles away. I waited until she texted all clear, before slipping out the back of her building and into the private investigator's unmarked car. The gallery was a converted warehouse, exposed brick walls, white partitions, and warm spotlights making every frame glow. Music drifted from a string quartet in the corner, and the air smelled faintly of wine and polished wood. I stood in the shadow of a partition, scanning the crowd. There he was. Mark. He looked almost exactly as I remembered. Sharp suit, easy smile, that calculated charm that had once felt like sunlight. Samantha stood beside him in a deep red dress, laughing at something an older couple said. Her hand rested on his arm like she'd been born there. The private investigator, posing as a guest, gave me a barely perceptible nod from across the room. His lapel camera was already rolling. I moved slowly, weaving between clusters of people, pretending to study the photographs. My pulse climbed with every step. When I reached him, I spoke softly but firmly. "Hello, Mark." He turned and froze. For a heartbeat, I saw everything flicker across his face. Shock, disbelief, calculation. Then came the practiced recovery. "Claire, my God, I thought..." that I was dead?" I said, my voice carrying just enough for nearby guests to hear. Heads began to turn. He laughed nervously, lowering his voice. "This isn't the place." "It's exactly the place." I stepped closer. "Did you tell them, Mark? That you forged a death certificate? That you tried to take my uncle's estate before the dirt on my grave had even settled?" Samantha blinked, glancing between us. "What is she talking about?" Mark's jaw tightened. "She's confused. She's been through a trauma." "Don't you dare," I snapped. "I remember every detail, the lies to my lawyer, the forged witness statements, moving into my uncle's house with her before my body was cold." A murmur spread through the crowd. Someone was filming on their phone. Mark reached for my arm, but I stepped back, my voice steady and clear. "You didn't just betray me, Mark. You buried me alive for money." The private investigator caught every word. Mark's mask slipped for just a second, his eyes hardening into something dangerous. But with the cameras, the witnesses, and the growing crowd, he couldn't act. Not here.
The silence after my last words felt heavy, electric. Then the questions started. "Is that true, Mark? Did you forge documents? What's going on here?" Mark held up his hands like a politician under fire. "Everyone, please. She's clearly in shock. This is not the time or place." "Then when is the time?" I cut in, my voice slicing through the murmurs. "Because I've been waiting since the day you tried to erase me." The private investigator edged closer, keeping the camera trained on us. Several guests pulled out their phones. Samantha stepped back from Mark, her brow furrowed. "You told me she died in the crash," she said slowly. Mark turned to her, his tone suddenly urgent. "She did, or so I was told. This is some kind of mistake." "No," I said. "The mistake was thinking I wouldn't survive. The mistake was thinking no one would find out about the bank appointments, the sale listings for my uncle's estate, the luxury dinners with her while I was in a hospital bed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. David had arrived at some point during the chaos. I caught sight of him near the entrance, phone in hand, recording. Our eyes met, and he gave me the smallest nod. We had enough. Mark's voice dropped low, but the microphones caught every word. "You don't know what you're starting here, Claire." "Oh, I do," I said. "I'm starting the part where you lose everything you stole, and then some." Security at the gallery began to move toward us, unsure whether to break it up. Before they could, Samantha shook her head and stepped away from Mark entirely. "You used me," she said, her voice cracking. "You told me. God, you told me we were free." Mark reached for her hand, but she pulled it back like his touch burned. The crowd shifted, people whispering, some openly glaring at him. His charm was gone, stripped bare under the weight of too many eyes and too much evidence. "I'll be seeing you in court," I said. Then I turned and walked out, David falling into step beside me. Outside, the drizzle had turned into a steady rain. It felt cold, clean. David didn't speak until we were in his car, the city lights blurring past the windows. "We've got him. Fraud, perjury, possible conspiracy to commit attempted homicide. If we can tie him to the accident." I exhaled slowly. "Then he doesn't just lose the estate, he loses his freedom." We drove in silence for a while before David added, "You know this isn't over. He's going to fight. Hard." I nodded. "Let him. I've already been buried once. I know how to dig my way out." But as we turned onto the main road, I spotted something in the side mirror. A dark sedan, headlights dim, following just far enough back to be suspicious. Mark might have lost the crowd, but he hadn't let go of me. The sedan followed us for 6 blocks before David took a sudden right onto a narrow side street. The car behind us hesitated, then turned too. My stomach tightened. "That's not a coincidence," David muttered. He made another sharp turn, then another, weaving through a tangle of one-way streets. The sedan stayed with us. Finally, David pulled into the nearly empty parking lot of a 24-hour diner. We slid into a booth inside, where the warm smell of coffee and bacon felt jarringly normal. From the window, I could see the sedan parked across the street. "Could be Mark. Could be someone he hired," David said, keeping his voice low. "Either way, we can't lead them to Lindsay's place." "Then we finish this tonight," I said. David arched a brow. "You mean?" "Yes, no more waiting for lawyers. We force his hand before he forces mine." David made a call. 10 minutes later, the private investigator arrived, laptop in hand. He'd already transferred the gallery footage, along with the audio of Mark admitting enough to put him in serious legal jeopardy. The plan was simple. Send Mark a message he couldn't ignore. David drafted an email attaching the footage, with a clear ultimatum. Sign a legal relinquishment of the estate and assets within 24 hours, or the evidence goes to the police and the media. We hit send. Within minutes, my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered. "Hello, Mark?" A pause, then his voice, low and dangerous. "You've made a mistake." "The only mistake I made was trusting you," I said. "The video's out there. Even if something happens to me, it still gets delivered." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "You think you've won? This isn't over." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "For you, it is." I hung up. The sedan across the street drove away a few minutes later. By morning, the signed relinquishment came through David's secure fax line. Everything, the estate, the accounts, even the personal property, was legally mine again. 2 days later, Mark was served with a court summons for fraud and perjury. By the end of the week, Samantha had filed for annulment. The last time I saw him was in the courthouse hallway. He looked smaller somehow, like the air had gone out of him. His eyes found mine, and for the briefest moment, I saw the man I had once loved. Then the mask dropped, and all that remained was the predator. I walked past without a word. When I finally returned to my uncle's estate, the gardens were overgrown, but the air was still and safe. Standing on the porch, I realized the truth. This wasn't just about reclaiming property or exposing lies. It was about taking back the life he tried to erase. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone bury me again.